यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जना वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जना वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर सत्य श्री श्रीमद डिवाइन ग्रेस ऐसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि। All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Okay. Please repeat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We'll do the prayers together. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, unto Naranarayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshuronmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavahamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamsha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Okay, we're continuing with our daily reading from 3rd canto. We're on canto 3, chapter 26. We're going to do from text 33 all the way through text 49 today, and our focus verse is text 33. Okay, and the title of the chapter is Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. So, in the previous chapter, what did we learn about? Yeah, the glories of devotional service. And yet, we're reading something about the fundamental principles of material nature now. We've gone to... Doesn't look like 101 when you read it, right? So, why is Kapiladev focusing on the fundamental principles of material nature? Mike. Yeah, Devahuti asked him to. Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, the entire conversation is coming about because Devahuti initiated a question, right? We had another mic also, no? Yeah. And why else is Kapiladev speaking this? What is the lotus feet of Krishna? You can use the mic. It's working there.
When we divided that Bhagavatam in 12 canto,
yeah,
the 3rd canto, which is the part of the lotus feet of the Krishna. So creations.
Yeah. So the first two cantos are considered. The lotus feet, 3 and 4 are his legs. No? That's one aspect. But very specifically, Kapildev says something in the beginning of the chapter on why he's speaking about this topic. Yes, Drishtadimna.
Knowledge is what can, it's the perfection.
Yeah.
Exactly said. So the perfection is knowledge.
Yeah. So this knowledge is what's going to give us perfection. And specifically he says, knowing which any person can be released from the influence from the modes of material nature. That's one thing why he says. And then other thing he says is what Drishtadimna Prabhu says, knowledge is the ultimate perfection of self-realization. I shall explain that knowledge unto you by which knots of attachment to the material world are cut. This is really important knowledge. This is the knife or the sword by which we can cut the knots that we have created in this material world. So he goes on to speak about what then? What is this knowledge that he's giving? He said, I'm going to give you this knowledge, right? And we've read till text 32. What is the knowledge that he's giving? Yeah, mostly in terms of matter, right? So he says, okay, Krishna is there, and then there is this unmanifested thing that consists of 25 elements. He said different things about the 25 elements that are there in its unmanifested state, which is called the pradhana. This is all there. All the material elements that we see are there, but it's in its unmanifested state. And then once Krishna starts glancing at it, all the living entities are impregnated into the subtle aspect of the material nature. And then what starts everything? Time. Time is Krishna himself, right? So for you to start anything, even Krishna is so detached, there needs to be an aspect of Krishna to start everything. So time comes in and then starts everything. It's like you keep everything separate, nothing happens. And then time comes and starts mixing everything. And then you get so much varieties as a result of things starting to combine with each other. And we've seen the subtle elements generate till the previous verses, right? How first the false ego is born, and then when false ego comes in contact with the mode of goodness, what is created? The mind. When it comes in contact with passion, intelligence. And then when it comes in contact with ignorance, what is created? Yeah, the sound actually. That's what we read with text 32. You know, when this egoism in ignorance is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the subtle element sound is manifested. And from sound comes the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. So that's where we stopped yesterday. Now we're going to go from text 33 all the way through 49, and then we'll come back to text 33. Okay, text 33.
Persons who are learned and who have true knowledge define sound as that which conveys the idea of an object, indicates the presence of a speaker screened from our view, and constitutes a subtle form of ether.
Yeah. So for every single element that is going to be created, we are going to see two things. So one is the previous verse on how this element itself is created, and the second thing is the characteristic of that element itself. So we'll come back to the characteristic of the element for sounds and concentrate more on it later. Let's continue. You read 2-3 because we have about 15-16 verses to cover.
The activities and characteristics of the ethereal element can be observed as the accommodation of room for the external and internal existences of all living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind.
Yeah. Sound is very important because it consists of ether, and ether is where all of us have space to exist.
From ethereal existence, which evolves from sound, the next transformation takes place under the impulse of time, and thus the subtle element touch, and thence the air and sense of touch become prominent.
Yeah. From sound, you have the sense of touch, right? Okay. Now the characteristics of
Softness and hardness and cold and heat are the distinguishing attributes of touch, which is characterized as the subtle form of air.
Yeah, so these are what the sense of touch gives us, right? We can touch and feel whether it's soft or hard, hot or cold, like that. Okay?
The action of the air is exhibited in the moment, mixing, allowing approach to the objects of sound and other sense perceptions, and providing for the proper functioning of all other senses.
Yeah. So sound is created, but for the sound to travel, what do we need? We need air. Okay? That's why in space they say you can't hear. There is no air.
By the interactions of the air and the sensations of the touch, one receives different forms according to destiny. By evolution of such form, there is fire, and the eyes sees different forms in the color.
Yeah. So we had the sound, and from the sound, space was created, and the interaction between space and sound created what? Touch, right? And then touch, the subtle form of touch is air, and then the interaction between touch and air created form, and from form you had fire. Yep. Okay.
My dear mother, the characteristics of form are understood by dimension, quality, and individuality. The form of fire is appreciated by its effulgence.
Okay. Go on.
Fire is appreciated by its light and by its ability to cook, to digest, to destroy cold, to evaporate, and to give rise to hunger, thirst, eating, and drinking.
Yeah. So these are all the qualities of fire.
By the interaction of fire and the visual sensation, the subtle element taste evolves under a superior arrangement. From taste, water is produced, and the tongue, which perceives taste, is also manifested.
So you see, three things are simultaneously getting created when the creation happens, right? One is the most subtle of all elements: sound, touch, form, and here you're having taste, like that. Then next one will be smell. From there, you have the element that helps you appreciate or feel the characteristics of that subtle element. So for sound, you have the ability to hear, and then the sense for hearing, ear is created. And then you come for the touch, the skin is created, and then the what else? No, the air is created. Touch is air, right? So touch, air, and your skin is created. You see, it goes from subtle and more gross and to the grossest element. So similarly, you see here, the taste is created first, and then you have water is created, right? And then tongue is created, and therefore your tongue always has water in it. You can see those elements, and they're connected with the senses that it's created. Okay, we should have got a chart, I think. Okay.
Although originally one, taste becomes manifold as astringent, sweet, bitter, pungent, sour, and salty due to contact with other substances. The characteristics of water are exhibited by its moistening other substances, coagulating various mixtures, causing satisfaction, maintaining life, softening things, driving away heat, incessantly supplying itself to reservoirs of water, and refreshing by slaking thirst.
Yeah. Okay.
Due to interaction of water with the taste perception, the subtle element odor evolves under superior arrangement. Thence the earth and the olfactory sense, by which we can variously experience the aroma of the earth, become manifest.
Yeah, this final and grossest element gets manifest. Okay.
Other, although one, becomes many as mixed, offensive, fragrant, mild, strong, acidic, and so on, according to the proportions of associated substances.
Yeah. So the original order that Srimad Bhagavatam says is the order of the earth itself. That's how order actually smells like. But then when it starts mixing with different substances, when you cook food preparations, the smell of that food preparation mixes, or some bad order mixes, and then you get different smells. Okay? 3 more.
The characteristics of the function of earth can be perceived by modeling forms of the Supreme Brahman, by constructing places of residence, by preparing pots to contain water, etc. In other words, the earth is the place of sustenance for all elements.
Yeah. You see, all elements are really, really subtle. And then when earth is created, it consists of the qualities of all the other previous elements, and that's what is sustaining all the other elements also. And more interestingly, we've seen different characteristics of different elements, right? The first characteristic of the earth element was what? We just read in this. No. The characteristic of the function of earth can be perceived by modeling forms of the Supreme Brahman. You see, the deity is the primary characteristic of how we utilize earth. Srimad Bhagavatam says, very interesting. Okay?
The sense whose object of perception is sound is called the auditory sense, and that whose object of perception is touch is called the tactile sense. The sense whose object of perception is form, the distinctive characteristics of fire, is the sense of sight. The sense whose object of perception is taste, the distinctive characteristics of water, is known as the sense of taste. Finally, the sense whose object of perception is odor, the distinctive characteristics of earth, is called the sense of smell.
Yeah, so now all the senses are getting created so that you can perceive all the other elements that was created before. And the last verse for today.
Since the cause exists in the effect as well, the characteristics of the former are observed in the latter. That is why the peculiarities of all the elements exist in the earth alone.
Yeah. You see, in touch, you have sound also. In air, you have sound. And then in form, you have both the previous 2 elements. And then in taste, you have the previous 3 elements. And in earth, we have all the previous 4 elements. So earth is where you have everything together in its totality. So let's go to text 33, which is our verse for today, and then focus on sound. Okay. Okay, you have it? Okay. Arthashrayatvam shabdhasya drashturlingatvam cha tanmatratvam cha nabhaso lakshanam kavayo vidhu. Arthashrayatvam shabdhasya drashturlingatvam cha tanmatratvam cha nabhaso lakshanam kavayo vidhu. Okay, somebody wants to chant? Arthashrayatvam shabdhasya drashturlingatvam Arthashrayatvam shabdhasya drashturlingatvam cha Tanmatratvam Chanabaso Lakshanam Kavayo Vidu. Mataji, would you like to chant? Arthashrayatvam Shabdasya Drashturlingatvam Evacha Tanmatratvam cha nabhaso Lakshanam Khavayo Vidhu. Okay. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. This is a word for word translation. Artha ashrayatvam, that which conveys the meaning of an object. Shabdasya, of sound. Drashtu, of the speaker. Lingatvam, that which indicates the presence. Eva, also. Cha, and. Tat matratvam, the subtle element. Cha, and. Nabasa, of ether. Lakshanam, definition. Kavaya, learned persons. Viduhu, know. Translation. Persons who are learned and who have true knowledge define sound as that which conveys the idea of an object, indicates the presence of a speaker screened from our view, and constitutes the subtle form of ether. Somebody read the purport? Who has the...
It is very clear herein that as soon as we speak of hearing, there must be a speaker. Without a speaker, there is no question of hearing. Therefore, the Vedic knowledge, which is known as Shruti, or that which is received by hearing, is also called Apurusha. Apurusha means not spoken by any person materially created. It is stated in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Tene Brahmarada, the sound of Brahman or Veda was first impregnated into the heart of Brahma, the original learned man, Adikave. How did he become learned? Whenever there is learning, there must be a speaker and a process of hearing. But Brahma was the first created being. Who spoke to him? Since no one was there, who was the spiritual master to give knowledge? He was the only living creature. Therefore, the Vedic knowledge was imparted within his heart by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated within everyone as Paramatma. Vedic knowledge is understood to be spoken by the Supreme Lord, and therefore it is free from the defects of material understanding. Material understanding is defective. If we hear something from a conditioned soul, it is full of defects. All material and mundane information is tainted by illusion, error, cheating, and imperfection of the senses. Because Vedic knowledge was imparted by the Supreme Lord, which is transcendental to material creation, it is perfect. If we receive that Vedic knowledge from Brahma in disciplic succession, then we receive perfect knowledge.
Okay. Next paragraph.
Every word we hear has a meaning behind it. As soon as we hear the word water, there is substance water behind the word. Similarly, as soon as we hear the word God, there is meaning to it. If we receive that meaning and explanation of God from God Himself, then it is perfect. But if we speculate about the meaning of God, it is imperfect. Bhagavad Gita, which is the science of God, is spoken by the personality of Godhead Himself. This is perfect knowledge. Mental speculators or so-called philosophers who are researching that what is actually God will never understand the nature of God. The science of God has to be understood in disciplic succession from Brahma, who was first instructed about knowledge of God by God Himself. We can understand the knowledge of God by hearing Bhagavad Gita from a person authorized in the disciplic succession.
Finish it up, Mataji.
When we speak of seeing, there must be form. By our sense perception, the beginning experience is the sky. Sky is the beginning of form, and from the sky, other forms emanates. Therefore, the object of knowledge and the sense perception begins from the sky.
Okay. So 3 things happen from the sound, right? One is sound conveys the idea of an object. So Prabhupada is giving the example of water, that when we say a word, it has some meaning. It's conveying something about the object or a person that we are speaking about. And 2, it's more subtler, right? It indicates the presence of a speaker screened from our view. So when there is a sound, it naturally means that there is somebody who is speaking, even though if you might not see him. At this point of creation, there is no form yet. So you've not seen the form yet. But still, just because there is no form that has been manifested yet, doesn't mean there is no person behind it. And of course, it constitutes the subtle form of ether. So we can see Prabhupada, did we read purport to text 32 yesterday? Did we read it? No. 29, okay. 32 is an amazing purport. This goes together, right? 32 and 33 goes together. So the entire material universe is created through sound. All the elements we see. And what combines to create sound? Which mode combines to create sound? Yeah. So this is the very nature of this entire creation, right? So the mode of ignorance agitates the other elements and starts creating sound. And it is through sound that everything else is created. And Prabhupada writes in the previous purport that it appears from this verse that all objects of our sense gratification are products of egoism in ignorance. This is the problem, that all of us are trying to satisfy our senses, but unfortunately, that is born out of ignorance. And anything that's born out of ignorance, the tamoguna, is not good for us. It's completely, in fact, the opposite of good for us. It's in fact destroys everything that is good for us, right? So therefore, when we are trying to associate ourselves with the senses and trying to enjoy from that perspective, since by very nature these senses are created by the mode of ignorance, the enjoyment that comes out of the senses are also going to be in the mode of ignorance. And sound is what starts or helps with that entire process of ignorance. Because in the beginning of the chapter, I think Kapiladev says, what happens? All of us are self-effulgent, right? As Atma or spirit souls, all of us are Chit. We are completely conscious. There is no tinge of ignorance in any of us as spirit souls, right? But something happens when creation begins. What happens? Does anybody remember from yesterday? Especially specific to what we are speaking about, all of us as spirit souls have these 3 qualities, right? Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Sat means we are eternal. Chit means we are full of knowledge or full of consciousness. And Ananda means we are blissful. This is our nature, right? But in our current state, we are thinking we are the bodies, and therefore we are thinking we are asat. Oh, the body dies, I am going to die. And there is no real knowledge, there is no real consciousness. Our consciousness is so covered. And then there is no real ananda that's there in this material world, because of the very nature of the elements that we saw, how it was created, right? The mode of ignorance can never give us ananda. So therefore the material nature, the material world can never give us happiness in that sense. So in the beginning, Kapiladev says, divided into varieties by her threefold modes. This is the pradhana that we're talking about. Material nature creates the forms of living entities, and living entities seeing this are illusioned by the knowledge covering feature of the illusory energy. This is what happens. For us to actually be in this material world and for us to try to enjoy this material world, it is impossible for us. Because of our very own nature, it is impossible for us. As spirit souls, we will never derive any happiness from this material world. But Krishna gives us this facility for us to enjoy in this material world. We are like, these adamant children who despite Krishna is saying, oh, this is not going to help you. No, I really want this. No, this is not going to help you. No, I really want to do this. And then Krishna creates this facility. For him to create this facility, what has to happen is that this chit nature of ours has to be covered. Without that chit nature of ours being covered, there is no way that we'll be able to enjoy in this material world. And therefore, that's what happens right in the beginning. Right in the beginning, this knowledge covering feature of the illusory energy covers us. This is also said in we will read how a living entity is born, right? And Kapilade will explain that within the womb, all of us are praying to Krishna, because it's a very painful situation that within the womb you're in this fetal position, you're in your own pus and blood and urine and all of that. And the living entity prays to Krishna and says, Krishna, I will never do this again. I'll never forget you. So please protect me. And Krishna says, yes, you serve me and then you can come back to me. This is the agreement that we have with Krishna. But as soon as we come out of the womb, we forget about Krishna and we start doing our own activities in terms of sense gratification. And it is said that there are different kinds of airs that are there in this material world, right? And the Gita talks about 5 kinds of air that is there within our body at least, right? Prana, apana, samana, udana, vyana, like that. Like that, similarly, we have several different kinds of airs also. That is basically the reason why everything moves. Without air, nothing can move. Like sound is there, but it moves because of air, no? So similarly, it is said that there is a kind of air called shata. That touches our head and then we forget everything that we were thinking of Krishna in the womb. And there is this acharya called Shatagopan. He's a acharya from the Sri Sampradaya. He's called Shatagopan because when he came out of the womb, Kopa means he was very angry. He was angry at the air Shata. And he kicked it. He said, no, you cannot give me ignorance. So that's why his name was called Shatagopan. But all of us, when we are born in this world, this is very necessary. And it gets reinforced to us through sound, right? Everything that we hear when we are young, how do we perceive things? Can babies that are born see very clearly? No. Can they feel any other perception very clearly? The only thing that they're completely dependent on is the sound of the sense of hearing. Right? They cry, they create the sound so that they can gain attention. Or when the mother is there, the child can feel the sound of the mother, the presence of the mother, like that. And from that age, the different sounds that we are hearing starts molding us, starts in fact trapping us in this material world. That is the nature of the sound in ignorance. But the sound is very, very powerful and magical even in its material sense, isn't it? When we hear somebody give a rousing speech, what do the politicians do? Even at this time and age, you have political meetings. They're speaking and speaking and speaking, right? Because this power of sound has this ability to change people's minds. It's very powerful, even in its material state. You can see, this is what happened with Hitler, isn't it? Everything that he did was to give rousing speeches where he could change the minds of people to say that these people are really bad, we are really good, therefore we can kill them. Sound has this very, very powerful, the songs that we hear has a very, very incredible ability to change the mood that we are in, right? So this sound in its material form also is very, very magical. But sound in its spiritual form is actually liberating. Why is it liberating?
You can hear holy name and the pastimes and activities.
Yeah, you can hear, but what does it do in terms of creation itself from what we've read? Yeah, it helps us to remember Krishna, it helps us purify. But sound is where everything starts. Right? It is sound when mixed with ignorance is where the entire creation happens. Therefore, it is sound that has the ability to liberate us from this ignorance also. Because that's the element that creates everything. You see? That's what Prabhupada says in the previous purport also on why sound is so important for us. Every single time we see in the scriptures, why is hearing emphasized so much. Shrinvatam swakata Krishna, Maya Shaktamana Partha Yogam Yatagnyasisi Tachrunu. The first thing in devotional service is hearing. And the very nature of hearing is you need sound to hear. And why is this element of sound so powerful is because it is from this element sound that everything is created and we are bound. And it has the ability to unbind us and release us from this material world. That is why this sound is so powerful. And Prabhupada says, it is stated also in the Vedanta Sutra that the sound is the origin of all objects and material possessions, that by sound one can also dissolve this material existence. Sound creates and binds us in this material world, but it is also an element, when used properly, that can help deliver us from this material world. So what kind of sound can help us deliver from this material world is what Prabhupada is speaking of in this purport. Right? There are different sounds and different people speaking to us. Can every single sound liberate us? No. We've seen every single sound can only bind us here. But there is one sound that can actually liberate us. What is the quality of such a sound that Prabhupada is saying? Transcendental vibration. But what is the quality of the transcendental vibration? It is...
It's not by a material.
Correct. It is not created by a material person. Prabhupada says it is devoid of all defects. Right? Anything that is there in this material world or that comes from a material person has these 4 defects that Prabhupada is saying. We have the propensity to cheat, our senses are imperfect, we are under illusion, and we have the capacity to make mistakes. None of us are perfect. So therefore, a sound that has these 4 qualities, how can it liberate us? By its very own nature, it has all these 4 faults. Therefore, such a sound can never liberate us. But there is one quality of sound, one particular variety of sound that doesn't have any of these 4 deficiencies. And such a sound can only come from a person who doesn't have any of these deficiencies, right? And therefore Prabhupada is saying, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye. He's quoting this from Srimad Bhagavatam. The first was that Lord Brahma, he was alone in this material world when he was created. And yet, he got the wisdom, right? When he was doing his austerities, somebody gave him the wisdom. And who was it? We've read that in detail in the 3rd chapter. Krishna himself, right? And Krishna doesn't have any of these qualities. And therefore, the sound that comes from Krishna is called a Paurusheya. Paurusheya means general people, right? A Paurusheya means it's not coming from any person in that sense of persons who have these 4 deficiencies. But it is coming from Krishna himself, and therefore this sound has the ability to deliver us from this material world. And that is why sound is so powerful. Sound is so powerful that the same element that can bind us can actually deliver us. And that is how what we are reading starts also, right? The entire Srimad Bhagavatam, you can see, gives the importance of sound in its very first verse. Tene Brahma Hrida. No other element or no other sense is specified right in the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. And yet, the power of sound and the mode in which this sound was delivered is emphasized right in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. That is why Srimad Bhagavatam can deliver us, right? We read, it can not only just deliver us. Getting out of this material misery is just one thing. You can dissolve all of these material elements just by sound, right? It goes from grosser to subtle, and then just by sound you can dissolve. But what happens as a result of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam? Heart is cleansed and loving service to the personality of Godhead is established as an irrevocable fact. You cannot change it after that. It's irrevocable. Right? At that point we become perfect. There is no chance that we might fall at that point. Because at that point it's irrevocable. That is what the potency of sound can give us. And the potency and the only sound that we have to chant in the times that we live in is the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. We have that. Everything is there in that 32 syllables that we have. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This has everything. Just like how material sound is so subtle and has everything to create this material world. Right? We cannot even perceive how from sound earth can come. right? And therefore, how can even we perceive that from this sound vibration of the Mahamantra, everything exists? Nam namakari bahuda nija sarva shaktis, Mahaprabhu says, right? Just in this name, every single potency of his is there. And this sound vibration can completely deliver us. So we're almost out of time, but I want to see if we can have examples of how this sound vibration, when heard in the material sense, can completely destroy us. Prabhupada gives this example again and again in the Gita. I'll give you a clue. And if you have other examples, you can give. And how the sound vibration, when heard from the proper source, and this is what Prabhupada is saying, that, okay, this is Auparushaya, it's coming from Krishna, but in the present moment, Krishna is not physically manifest in front of our eyes. So for us to hear this message, we have to hear it from a proper source, from the mouth of the spiritual master, right? What do we say in the Guru Puja? Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittete Kuriyakya. And also he says, Chakudan dilo jay, janme janme Prabhu say, Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashito. That this material sound can go from one ear and go to the other ear. Right? It really doesn't make too much of change in our consciousness. But this Divya Gyan, this transcendental knowledge that the spiritual master gives us, has this incredible ability to go and then cleanse our heart. And then give us this knowledge from within the heart. Hriday Prakashito. Right? Cheto Darpana Marjanam happens as a result of hearing this transcendental sound vibration. So, does anybody have any examples of how, first, the sound vibration can actually completely derail us? How this sound vibration is so powerful? Yes, Arjun Prabhu? Yeah, can you? Or just how the sense of sound is so powerful?
Well, I was thinking, I was looking into this, study that basically, talks about how, this new age of hip hop and like rap has like an immense effect on, young people's consciousness.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to, relationships or, the idea of like earning money through illicit means and whatnot. So something as simple as listening to music can sometimes, change your perception of life.
Yeah. So what we hear, although we might not really understand, right? Every single part of what you say you might not understand, but the lyrics and the mood of the song and so many things that come as a result of that sound has the ability to shape us, shape our consciousness, and therefore our entire character as a result of it, right? What else? How the sense of sound is so powerful that it can completely derail even the most focused of all people.
Tinkling of the ankle bells.
Yes. You remember Prabhupada gives this example so many times in the Gita of whom? Who is this personality?
Someone knew me.
This is Vishwamitra. Yeah? This is actually an exalted sage, Vishwamitra, because he was Lord Ramachandra personally went with Vishwamitra. When Dasharatha Muni, he came to the court of Dasharatha and said, please give me your sons. At this time, Lord Ramachandra was 12 years old. So he was so exalted that Lord Ramachandra was personally there with him for a few days. But before he became such an exalted devotee, he was actually a king. And he had this huge tiff with this another sage called Vashishta. And therefore, he also wanted to become a Brahmana. And he was performing incredible austerities. It was not very easy what he was trying to do. And yet, he was closing his eyes. All his senses were completely trying to focus on his meditation. And then the demigods were very afraid because he could become really powerful by his austerities. And therefore, they sent a damsel. And then just his eyes were closed, everything was completely in control. Just by hearing the tinkling ankle bells of this damsel, just that woke him up, from his meditation. And then the entire path of meditation completely went in another direction. And he got married to her, he bore children, and then of course he came back and became a great sage. But just this one tinkling ankle bell, right, could completely derail you. The Krishna says, just one sense is enough for you to completely go astray in the Gita, he says. And this sound is incredibly powerful like that. This is for a person who's trying really hard to progress, that this sense can completely derail you, right? And yet, you see the exact opposite in a devotee, where you're doing austerities for the sake of the Lord, then the Lord is protecting you. The exact same damsel came to another exalted devotee. And the result of what happened was incredibly different from Vishwamitra. You remember who this devotee was? Yeah, Haridas Thakur. The same problem. Another person was envious of how Haridas Thakur's name was becoming very popular. It's not because Haridas Thakur wanted it, it's because of his spiritual potency that everybody was being attracted to him. And he sent a prostitute to go and enamor him. And then what Haridas Thakur did? He said, no, please wait, I have to finish my rounds. This power of sound again, right? So this prostitute who's come to somehow entice Haridas Thakur is sitting there and hearing the sound from Haridas Thakur. He says, please, can you wait a little bit more? And hearing the sound. He chants for 22 hours a day. And this person, and then he says, I'm so sorry, I haven't finished chanting. And then this person just sleeps there. And then he says, can you please come back the next day? Haridas Thakur is not even sending her back. He's so confident about himself and the holy name and the power to control his senses. And for 3 days, she's sitting there, right? With Haridas Thakur, hearing the holy names of the Lord. And then what happens? This sound has an incredible transformational effect in the prostitute. She becomes a devotee, an exalted devotee actually. So two things happen, right? One is that just this power of sound itself, the Mahamantra itself has this ability to transform. But when this sound is heard from a realized soul, it has a completely, incredibly different effect. The sound in itself is really potent, but when it comes from the mouth of a realized soul, the potency is unbelievable. Therefore, Prabhupada says, the songs of Narottam Das Thakur, even if you don't really know the meaning of the songs, it has the power. It's like a thunderbolt. It can go in your heart and then change and transform your heart. This is the power of sound coming from a realized person. The sound in itself is powerful, but when it comes from an exalted devotee, even if we don't really understand what's happening, it can have the ability to transform our hearts. So sound is a very important element, and that's why Prabhupada is focusing so much in two purports. I would highly encourage all of you to read the purport for text 33 also, where he says, and he's so confident that this sound can liberate us. This is where everything is being created from, and therefore this element has the ability to liberate us also. And like that we can see many more examples. This is the example of Ajamila, right? A person who was so sinful, and yet the sound at the end of his life, this one name, Narayana, that he said, was able to deliver him. Like so many examples we can see of how this sound, when used in proper sense, can actually help us. And this sound, when it's not used in a proper sense, can actually harm us. Vritrasura was created to kill Indra, but in the end, the same sound, they said the mantra wrong. And therefore, instead of the demon going to, the demon was supposed to kill Indra, but it became that Indra would kill this demon. Right? The sound is very subtle and yet has incredible power in a way that we channel it and use it. So we have to be very careful. Therefore, Rupa Goswami says in this Nectar of Instruction that one thing related to sound can actually destroy our bhakti. Does anybody remember what? He says actually 6 things destroy our bhakti. No? Hearing from Mayavadis? What are the 6 things that he says destroy bhakti? Prajalpa. This is the one thing that's associated with sound, Rupa Goswami says, right? That Atyahara, Prayasasya, Prajalpa, Niyamagraha, Janasangasya, Laulyamcha. So Prajalpa and Janasanga. Janasanga is not very direct, but Prajalpa is very direct to sound. It's completely like speaking. And not just any speaking. Prajalpa means idle talk. Can destroy our bhakti. The same sound that can actually deliver us, even among the society of devotees, if it turns into Prajalpa, the same sound can destroy our bhakti. So the sound is very powerful. It has the ability to deliver us, it has the ability to destroy us, depending on how we use it. If the exact same sound is used in the service of Krishna, by chanting the names of Krishna, by hearing about Krishna, by reading about Krishna, by singing about Krishna, then it is very powerful. It can deliver us. But on that basis, we get together, right? All of us as devotees, Prabhupada has given us this incredible facility where none of us are related to anybody, but anybody from any part of the world, when they come to Dallas, we immediately connect. This connection is based on Prabhupada, is based on Krishna, right? That's how all of our relationships are established in the beginning. And yet, in that Sangha, if we remove that aspect on which all of us come together and then start doing something else that's material, then that can actually destroy our bhakti. So that's how powerful this sound is, that the acharyas directly have to mention it, that this can destroy our bhakti. Yeah, so we'll stop here if there are any questions or thoughts or reflections. We can take it. Yes, Drishtyadhyam Prabhu. Now we need the mic.
So this is a bit of a technical or kind of obscure question, but you're speaking about how, well, we see a lot of examples of the power of like Shabda Brahman, and
Yes.
how even when Prabhupada was lecturing in another language, he still insisted that his disciples would listen, because it's not something that's on the like a language basis. And you were saying even with Narottam Das Thakur's songs that
Yeah.
even if you don't know the meaning, just by hearing it, it's very purifying.
Yeah.
So I kind of had this thought in my mind about, maybe people who have impaired hearing or something like that. And I was thinking, we're talking about this power of sound in a very literal sense, that
Correct.
we're actually hearing a vibration. But
Yes.
I'm wondering also, or reading. Is reading also like the same Shabda Brahman transcendental vibration that can be accessed by anyone?
It does. Therefore, Krishna says, in the Gita, he says, Yam yam vapi smaran bhava tyajachante kalevaram. He doesn't say yam yam vapi shravan bhava or kirtan bhava. Right? The emphasis that he's putting is on smarana. And smarana comes from thought. Right? Even when you're reading, the sound is there as thoughts in a very subtle form. So the discussion that we have had is in the grossest sense of how sound is, right? The ability to directly hear it. But when you read, sound is still present in a very subtle form in terms of its thought. Words are getting formed in your mind when you read, isn't it? There is some background talk that happens in your mind. It's not in a very gross form, but this sense of sound is still there in the mind. So definitely, it can deliver us. Reading is hearing in a different form, is in a subtler form, right? So even if people are hearing impaired, even if they are blind, now you have braille text and things like that, right? So you can still figure out what you're reading and then think about it. What happens is, if we lose the ability to think, is when we are completely dependent on Krishna. But as long as any person has the ability to think a little bit, then this sound vibration is still there in a very subtle form. Yeah. Even if you're hearing impaired, you can, if you have your eyes, the sense, you can still read, and then you can understand. Right? The sound actually comes from, because before this, what was created? The mind was created, from which all the senses actually come. But till your mind is sound, your senses can still be perceived using the mind. Make sense? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Gokulanda Prabhu.
Thank you, Drishtyadhyam Prabhu, for sharing that. Just carrying over his thought, I was thinking, in the past also I've seen several times few devotees mentioning, very senior devotees, that any junior devotees sitting on the Vyasas and speaking, it's shut down. They just can't. But thank you for a wonderful class on this very important subject, sound. So I was just thinking, just like, a mail carrier or postman, right, in India we say. So whether it's a new postman or very senior veteran postman, doesn't matter if he's bringing you $1 million check, right? So connecting that to, I used to hear about Jananivas Prabhu. every single day. He's there in Bhagavatam class.
Yes.
Even in Bengali classes. He may not be understanding Bengali. I'm not sure whether he knows Bengali. But he's always there, even in Bengali Bhagavatam class.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, it doesn't matter which language it is spoken through, and doesn't matter who is, carrying that message.
Yes.
So neophyte devotee, Uttamadhikari, Madhyama, doesn't matter. What matters is the message that is carried through the parampara.
Yeah. Thank you, Gokulananda Prabhu. This is a nice point also, that as long as the speaker is repeating the same message, then the message has the potency. Yeah, definitely. And we can go in great details about just this one topic of how to speak, and it also matters on who is speaking and how to speak also, right? What you get from a exalted devotee is really powerful, because their level of realization is more, and things like that they can transfer this into your heart. That's what's happening essentially in the Bhagavatam class. They say in any education system of education, right? Two things happen. One is the visible curriculum. Visible curriculum means this is physics. These are the things that I'm going to teach you for this semester. At the end of this semester, you'll have the ability to do this, this, and this. This is the visible curriculum. But one of the most important things is the invisible curriculum. The invisible curriculum is what is transferred from the teacher to the student without even the student knowing what it is. Which is basically the character, the mood, the attitude. So many things from the teacher is transferred from the speaker to the student, right? So in our Bhagavatam classes, we have the visible curriculum. Hey, this is the text that we're going to read. This is the translation purport we're going to discuss. This is a visible curriculum. But there is an invisible curriculum that basically transfers from whoever is speaking to whoever is listening, if the listener is receptive enough. Because the message is very powerful. Srimad Bhagavatam in itself is very powerful. So if the speaker also has that potency, it doubles up. But even without that, Bhagavatam itself is very potent. Therefore, when it comes out and when you say it exactly, it has the ability to change people's hearts. So thank you for bringing it up, that Janivas Prabhu has that ruchi, that he can sit in Srimad Bhagavatam classes from anybody and everybody, even in a language that he has no idea. Probably he might understand, but in the beginning stage at least. Thank you, Prabhu. That's an amazing example. Yes, Rasraj Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So, lots of questions, but I just wanted to, one point that really stuck was the whole idea of negative sound. I think, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is, there's two things that you need to do, is to chant the holy names and to not criticize devotees.
Yes.
I think it was really, both of them related to sound. The surprising thing is, and this is a confusing situation for me, is that it almost, because sound is a manifestation from the mode of ignorance, it almost seems as the mode of ignorance is the one that delivers us.
No.
So if you can clarify that.
Yeah. No, that's why the quality of sound is different, right? So from the mode of ignorance, the material element